Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, executive producer, Light Leaf Productions. I am use he, they pronouns, and I'm bringing you another live broadcast with news, current information, and some special guests from the city of Philadelphia. We're under our third day of a dark gray sky, and as you can see by my face, I was yelled at by my eye doctor yesterday for not wearing my glasses enough. So I'm doing that. Um, Today we got a pretty good show for you. We're going to be talking about Indigenous Peoples Day. That was Monday. Sorry if your trash pickup is a day late, but we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the native peoples that were first affected by the European onslaught of immigration. And we're going to talk about urban development and Black culture, how unchecked urban development impacts Black culture. We'll talk about the PPP and folks who've gotten the PPP and haven't really followed what the PPP is supposed to do. We're going to talk about some of those folks. And finally, we'll be talking about tax liens, the tax lien scheme from the 90s that is still affecting the Philadelphia real estate market to this day. Um, and then, so we have some special guests for you this morning. We'll have Noelle Diane Johnson from Artists Heal. And we will also have Michael O'Brien and Imani Moss from the 11th Hour Theater Company production of Soon. And so first I'm going to start with Michael and Imani, and I'll bring them on screen. Welcome to the show, guys. And if you would please introduce yourselves and your pronouns and what it is you do. We'll start with Michael.
Yeah, I'm Michael Philip O'Brien. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the current producing artistic director of 11th Hour. I'll be leaving in November, but I'm also the director of the new musical we're doing soon.
Hi, my name is Imani Moss. My pronouns are she, her, and I am starring in Soon as Charlie.
Great. Welcome, welcome. And then Noelle was just able to join us. Let me fix this up so that we have Noelle also on screen. Hang on one second. It's just gonna let me transition back to myself and transition to Noelle. Noelle Diane Johnson. Once I get you added onto screen here, there you go. There's that, and we'll go to that. Great. Noelle, if you would please introduce yourself, your pronouns, and what it is you do. And you're on mute. Oh, you're a little bit frozen too.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi, folks. My name is Noelle Diane Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm here on behalf of my company, Artists Heal. I'm the owner and founder of a company called Artists Heal. We create healing and care spaces for collaborative art making.
Great. So let's jump into the conversation, just starting with the program Soon. What is Soon? When is Soon? And where is Soon?
Yes, well, the show Soon is a new musical. It was written in 2015 by a writer, Nick Blameyer, and it has had a production at the Signature Theater and a couple smaller productions prior to that. But then obviously the pandemic kind of shut everything down as well for him in this piece. And so we're co-producing it with a company out in Lancaster called Prima Theater. So the cast is currently running there until October 23rd. And then we'll very quickly bring it back to Philly and open the next weekend in Philly and run for 2 weekends here in Philadelphia. And it's a 4-person musical, very 11th hour, I guess, is, in style. It's, contemporary. It's about the end of the world is coming. Climate change is much further along than we all thought. That's kind of where the show begins. And we find Charlie, who is played by Imani Moss over here, self-isolating in her apartment in New York City. And kind of there's 3 other characters who are her only confidants at this point. And so the story focuses around her and this kind of path that she's dealing with during this crisis. So yeah, but it's also very funny. It's actually really funny. So that's it's not a super crazy dramatic piece about the end of the world. It's pretty funny too. So
you have to be a little bit funny about the drama that's happening in front of our eyes. Otherwise, I think we'd all go a little bit nuts. But
yeah.
Imani, what's it like playing I guess, basically what's really happening?
It is very realistic. I think there's a little bit of Charlie in all of us, who she finds what she likes, and then she's like, okay, well, I'm set, that's all I need to write out the rest of the world. And I've been there. So, like my bed, some Netflix is everything I need, but I think she definitely is someone that has been through the ringer and is just you know what, this is what I'm going to choose. This is what makes me happy. And this is how I'm going to spend the rest of my days. So there's definitely a little bit of Charlie in all of us. And it's very exciting to see this show on stage, just because it is very relevant to today. And I think audiences will learn a lot from just spending an hour and 40 minutes with us,
Well, I mean, yeah, audiences. I feel like audiences always learn something spending time with us, no matter how we get them in seats, but it is always nice to bring something new to folks.
Teach and delight.
Oh, that was Ardencia Hall Karambe. Let me welcome Dr. Ardencia Hall onto the screen. I'm just gonna do a quick transition here, not do this the nice way. So hold on 1 second. There we go. There's Dr. Ardencia Hall Karambe. Good morning.
I can't help myself. I always have to throw something in there. If we're talking about theater, it has to be thrown in the ring by me. Okay. So, just kidding.
Good morning, Dr. Hall. And I hope everything is going well with you. I know you've had some little ups and downs in the last couple of weeks, so I'm hoping everything is well with you.
Actually, my home healthcare nurse just left, so my ribs are healing nicely, but I'm here. Thank God, I'm here.
Excellent. We would be at a loss without your voice, so really appreciate you joining us. And just to come back around to Soon, what I know we've mentioned dates, we've mentioned places already. What are the tickets like? I know for those watching on Facebook, Megan, our associate producer, has pasted the link in the chat, but how can people purchase tickets and how can people see Soon?
Yeah, people can go to our website, 11thhourtheatercompany.org, and you can purchase your tickets there. We have 10 performances in those the last week of October and the first week of November. We're doing it at Christchurch Neighborhood House. So it's we'll have it socially distanced. Masks and proof of vaccination are required for attendance. And yeah, we hope that people will come out and check us out.
Awesome. And let's transition a little bit onto Noelle's company, and if you could please just reintroduce your company's name and what do you guys do?
Hi, everyone. So my company is called Artists Heal, ARTISTS, Heal, HEAL. And we create healing and care spaces for collaborative art making with a mission to re-standardize what artistic practice and process looks like in a decolonized way. So typically that's through different programming workshops. We're looking into beginning youth programming. And myself, I've been functioning as an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant and officer in different theater companies in the city.
Great.
Brief overview.
Thank you for that brief overview. So that people who aren't on the inside of these conversations that we've been having in the Philadelphia theater community can just get a little insight into what's been going on. What would you say is the current state of the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion in Philadelphia theater? What are some of the things that your company is doing? What are things that other people are highlighting?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that, folks have been doing this work for years. I've been doing this work for about a decade, equity, diversity, and inclusion. But I think after the events of last year, 2020, in the summer of 2020, the awareness really spiked for a lot of folks that the working conditions for everyone in, American theater were subpar, specifically for marginalized folks, Black folks, folks living with disabilities, folks who are trans or queer. So the need to have a person in spaces when you're collaboratively art making or theater making that has their eye on the ways that white supremacy manifests within the space became really apparent and necessary. And that's the hole that I'm trying to fill. Artists Heal, I believe that there are many different ways to dismantle white supremacy, white American theater supremacy, and my primary device is healing. I believe in the power of healing, and I believe that if folks can heal and step into their power of what that healing is for themselves, it allows just enough distance between yourself and any trauma you may have experienced, whether it be personal, collective, institutional, to be able to navigate spaces and navigate communities without having to leave. You're still able to participate in communities, you're still able to participate in the work, understanding that your support doesn't completely come from the institution, it can come from elsewhere as well. But allowing yourself to be able to still be in these spaces. So my goal is to, when I go into these spaces, to decenter whiteness, with the idea that white supremacy harms all of us, harms white folks too, and create spaces that are self-liberating and equitable for people to really be able to have their creativity thrive, because we're doing theater, because we need creativity to make shows.
I mean, what I find interesting about the diversity and equity conversation and what you just said, that, that white supremacy also harms white folks, is that we actually see this in action. There's the IATSE strike that is pending on the West Coast for streaming production, and there's the strikes at the Nabisco and Kellogg's plants that have happened, and you see a lot of pushback from the working class against some of these norms, I guess you would call it. I don't know what the right word is. Some of the institutionalization of of a colonial mentality that has really come to the forefront in the last 20, 30 years in the workplace. I find it interesting that it's kind of a follow-on on the events of 2020, and starting with the George Floyd protests, and then you had protest movements build around all of these conditions that were seemingly acceptable and accepted um, for years, for decades. And now you have people pushing back against those. And, you know, where I'm going with this is perhaps not clear, but I find it fascinating from the perspective of somebody who's reporting on these kinds of things, and there's the conversation going around constantly about the workers, the not being enough workers, not being enough job seekers, that there's a lack of employable people, and I find that that whole line of thought to be completely ridiculous, and I think it has directly to do with what you're talking about, which is suddenly for these employers there is a new social norm, and it takes a moment to, I guess, come to grips with that new social norm. What as somebody who does this work, on behalf of, like, as a negotiator in this kind of system, um, is what I would say, like a DEI expert or EDI expert, however you want to organize those letters. Um, does is you're kind of in the middle between kind of the workforce and the people who are in, owners, hiring managers, etc. What what would you say, like, what has been the pushback or even door openings of from the executive side of this, from the business owners, from people in production, from producers, from that perspective?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So when I do this work, it's important for me to remind folks that, theater and our society in general is steeped in white supremacy, and it's been normalized. And white supremacy relies on manipulation and control, and it relies on the people that are being oppressed by white supremacy to participate in the systems of being manipulated and controlled. So now that folks have come into this awakening, and again, many people have been doing this for many, many years. It's just more of, more folks are kind of more aware of what's happening. The system is bumping up against something because the manipulation and control that's necessary for white supremacy as a device to operate, it's kind of like stagnant. There's kind of like a kink in the machine that's happening there. So
that's a nice way of putting it.
Thank you. When I put, an honor, Dr. Hall. When I talk about this work, I talk about dysfunctional versus dysfunctional, DIS functional versus DYS functional. And dysfunctional DIS functional is it does not function. So a lot of times when it comes to executives or leadership or boards, when we're talking about theater and nonprofits, academia, when you're talking about higher ups, the hierarchies that are necessary and have been put in place and normalized through white supremacy. If it's DIS functional, meaning it does not function, it becomes very clear that something's wrong. And typically folks in power will make a shift because at the end of the day, they're trying to produce a product, they're trying to run a university, they're trying to run a nonprofit, whatever that is. DYS functional means that it functions, right? You'll still get the product, the university will still be run, The nonprofit will still get all of the grants and the funding that it needs. But in the meantime, it's harming the most marginalized people. So that's why I like to empower people when it comes to healing. But I think what's happening right now is a lot of the people in power are starting to dip into this DIS functional, because we, as marginalized people, are starting to rely on our interdependence, realizing that we're not alone in this struggle and in this fight that we've been in. And suddenly this device of white supremacy that's been able to operate because of our disempowerment as marginalized people, whatever intersections you fall into, suddenly isn't working. So it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to go into institutions, predominantly white institutions, and to be heard and to be listened to. And it also is I'm also very adamant that I do this work with folks that want to do this work with me. There are many institutions that are not ready to do this work, and there's no make wrong and there's no harm in that. People are just in different places in their journey. So when I go into an institution and I do this work, or when I work with people, when I work with individuals, I'm meeting folks where they are. Because if you don't meet folks where they are, it doesn't work. You know, if you're kind of pushing.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just,
No
just
problem.
to add to the conversation, I was just having this conversation on social media with regards to the Dave Chappelle special that has had so much feedback. We're all you guys are all on screen, so feel free to jump in anytime you want. Follow Dr. Hall's example. But the special has received a lot of pushback because of the way that Dave Chappelle talks about transgender individuals in the beginning of the special. But one of the most interesting analyses of the whole conversation that I've seen is that if you actually wait until the punchline is what Dave Chappelle has always done, which is he takes those negatives and then turns them into farce because of his punchline, and thus taking what he's saying and highlighting how stupid it is from his right. And so there's all these calls to cancel Dave Chappelle, get the special taken down, etc. And my take on it is the problem isn't so much with the special as it is with the communication method. We all produce things, right? And so when you're producing something, you have to know who your audience is or who you're trying to reach with your message. And like you're saying, Noelle, you have to meet people where they are. We live in this era of people are expected to put content warnings on their own content on their Facebook posts. You're not going to be able to start out a joke with really negative words and expect that your audience is going to stick with you through to the punchline. If that, not your whole audience, your whole audience isn't going to they're just not going to do it. That's what
example. Yeah, that's a great example, James. I watched that whole thing. I'm a fan of Dave Chappelle. I think Dave Chappelle is a master at his craft. And part of it is, research based. I'm like, okay, what is this man going to talk about this time? But I think Dave Chappelle is the perfect example of, the thing that happens when you are a marginalized person advocating for marginalized people, and you are a marginalized person being affected by being a marginalized person. And what is that? What is that kind of balance? What is that thing? And I think that Dave Chappelle, his experience as a cis het Black man is bumping up against this other experience that he doesn't have an experience of. But that's a great example, because if you watch the whole thing, there is this, you know, gentle kind of like tender ending to it, where he's a master at it. He's a master comedian, you know what I mean? But I think that is exactly what's happening in the theater industry and a lot of these industries right now, is that folks are trying to figure out how to advocate for themselves and advocate for others. And, you know, for me, for example, I go into spaces and I'm trying to figure out how to advocate for artists. And I'm an artist. I like do art as well. And I'm a marginalized person being affected by being a marginalized person. So
how does this interact with so you know, the main topic of the day is Indigenous Peoples Day. That was Monday. You know, here in Philadelphia, it is officially Indigenous Peoples Day. It is no longer Columbus Day. The Columbus Day is the federal holiday. Philadelphia recognizes the holiday as Indigenous Peoples Day. It is Philadelphia as a city decided, you know, we're going to honor the indigenous people who were here on this land before us, instead of honoring Columbus, the explorer who brought European influence to the Americas. So how do we? But clearly, even here in Philadelphia, there's this pushback against that. There's this pushback, you know, like you know, on all of the posts by any political individuals, any recognized individuals that posted about Indigenous Peoples Day, you instantly the first reactions, the first social pushback is always, you know, Columbus Day, like in all caps with, you know, exclamation points and Italian flags and I'm confused. How do we there's obviously, you know, like this obviously links into what you're talking about. Like, how do we meet people where they are? They're not ready yet to give up the idea of Columbus Day, but as a society, we really need to move on from that. Like, there's enough people that are impacted by the violence that Columbus brought to the Americas, that we need, as a society, we need to move on. Like, you know, we need to move on from the
James,
reasonings. Yeah.
I was going to say, in many ways, that's easier said than done. And when you sit in a position where you, as long as you hold on to that knowledge and you feel you're sitting in a position and that knowledge and that history gives you a certain amount of power, you're going to hold on to it. Mm-hmm. Power doesn't usually just give up its power. Most of the time you have to wrestle it away from them, and so, or massage it, depending on how you do it. But most people don't give up their power easily. And so you have to, this is the whole foundation of the United Snakes is built upon the idea that white supremacy, Columbus, you know, I mean, man, Columbus? He didn't know where he was going. That brother had no sense of direction. He thought he was heading to India. He just happened to run into a rock and found somebody there and wanted to say, poof, I discovered something. But how do you discover something when someone is already there? That shows your arrogance. You refuse.
Well, what he discovered was that he was very dumb. That's what he discovered.
You and was being led by a Moor, but we won't even talk about that. But another question, it's like you're coming into someone's home and you're telling them, "Oh, I'm going to plant myself here and I'm going to redesign your whole house because you didn't do it right." And whatever this is, it's not it's their arrogance and being able. Mm-hmm. People don't like hearing that they're arrogant. People don't like hearing things about themselves that are negative. It messes with their psyche of who they are. Mm-hmm. And for generations in this country, people have been, their imagery of themselves and of their community has been built on these false images and these idols, these false idols. And now they're being dismantled. And for some people, that's going to be hard. That's going to be, and it's going to take time. And for some people, it's going to end up being violent.
Yeah. And Dr. Hall got frozen there for a moment, but I believe that her last word was going to be violent. And how do we negotiate that as a social structure though? Like, you're not going to be able to always have society respond um, in a polite way. Like, you can look at the end of slavery. You can look at the end of um, religious persecution, which was, like, basically why the United States was founded in the way it was in order to end religious persecution. Um, how do how do how do we make this next step? How do we get this next transition in society where we have everybody represented nicely, and have all these diverse voices without going through the violence and upheaval that we've had to do every time before?
Oh man, that's a big question, James.
I
That's
like
a really big
asking big
question.
questions.
I know. I mean, uh, I I don't know if it's possible to get there without the, upheaval and, like, you know, uh, rebellion and revolt, in order to get there. Like, I just we're you know, Dr. Hall was talking about the fact of, like, Columbus coming, and and just the idea that people aren't going to give up power without a fight. And we've talked so much about, like, privilege and what white privilege is over the last 2 years. It has been, like, a huge debate, and I think that, like, that is, like, the stupid Columbus Day arguments are, like, the ultimate example of white privilege, of the fact of, like, that it is the idea that you can, oh, of course, I knew that was going to happen. I lost it.
It's with everybody today. Freeze.
Oh no. We still have your audio a little bit, but
You do, yeah. I knew that was
yeah.
going to happen because I used my iPhone and I meant to turn it off and I didn't turn it off. So there you go. I'm back.
Okay,
I'm
we
sorry.
got you back.
But the idea that, like, that the goal of this, the mission of this name change, the mission of this is to create a day that is more inclusive, that is, bringing the sacrifice of other people into the fray that are not recognized and are marginalized, and the fact that as a white person, you're there preaching that, no, it's extremely important that Christopher Columbus is still acknowledged for all the amazing things that he's done, when it's been proven many times over that that is the antithesis of what he brought to this country. It's the ultimate definition of, like, white privilege, right? Of the fact that, you can still be fighting for this thing that is so antiquated in its concept and its mindset and its mind frame, that
I want to talk
right,
about
like,
one of the fights about this thing, which fascinates me. We currently have in the city of Philadelphia, there's a lawsuit against the city of Philadelphia about Indigenous Peoples Day and about the lack of recognition of Columbus Day. And one of the co-signers of this lawsuit is one of our city council members, Councilmember Squillo. And this bothers me to no end. I understand Councilmember Squilla represents a predominantly Irish Italian heritage neighborhood, and a predominantly represents those groups in city council. Um, but co-signing onto a lawsuit that whether you believe that Columbus Day should still be recognized as a holiday or not, he co-signed onto a lawsuit that is based in the idea that the Arawak, Kalinago, and Taino peoples who Columbus first encountered were actually violent and killing each other, and therefore Columbus brought peace and civilization to these savage peoples. And if you read the, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and so what? If I'm fighting with my family in my house, that's my business. You came in my house. You don't tell me how to run my house, and you don't put order in my house. So
regardless of the fact that they weren't. Yeah.
Okay. And so once again,
I mean,
that arrogance, that savior complex coming into no, you don't tell me how to run my house.
And what's interesting to me is like this and I actually just saw an article that goes down this line. This is an extension of the Crusader mentality. So you had the Islamic people, Islamic followers, crusading against the Christian followers, and both sides thinking that the other, or calling the other savage and or unsophisticated, when really they were two of the most advanced cultures at the time. They just believed in different gods. But and that still goes on to this day, even in Europe, where you have people. The whole Brexit thing was because they didn't want Muslim peoples emigrating to England and fed off of this kind of jingoistic territorial thing of not wanting culture to change. How do we change culture with with that in it? Like we how do we change this whole maybe I'm crazy because I grew up in a multicultural household, and I've had to fit into multiple cultures, so I've always like really bought into, and I now know it's like propaganda, but I've always really bought into kind of the melting pot mentality of bring your culture, bring your food, bring your art to this conversation, and it'll be cool, and we'll all try on new things and experience new things. How do we make that the reality? How do we make that more than propaganda? That's kind of my question, but
I can jump in a little. So this is definitely, I have a company with the name Heal in the name. So this is definitely my way. I approach this work from a place of radical grace and radical compassion, because it's trauma. White supremacy is traumatic, right? And this idea of hurt people, understanding that a lot of the violence, psychological violence, emotional abuse, mental, physical abuse was happening in European countries before white folks came over, and then started to direct that trauma towards marginalized folks with different skin colors, folks with different cultures. So it's a perfect example of how trauma works when you're coming from a trauma-informed perspective of these people were being abused, they fled, and then they took that abuse, whatever happened to them mentally, that thing that was being passed down, and then abused other people. So a lot of times when I'm working with white folks, I'm really coming at it from a place of, oh, trauma. And when you come into this awareness of it, there is, so someone, for example, that's like standing in front of a Columbus statue who's like, rah, rah, rah. Those are not the type of people that I really work with, because I can meet you where you are within a certain boundary, right? So there's certain people that I'm like, you're not ready for what I'm dishing out, so I can't put my energy into it. But the folks that I am able to meet, a lot of times that awareness has happened. And to your point, Dr. Hall, this idea of white supremacy and being a good person are not the same thing. But I think for a lot of white folks that are starting to realize that they're operating within white supremacy, it's totally contradicting their idea of them being a good person, because that's the society that we live in. It says that these things are the same when they really have nothing to do with one another. So I come from it from a place of healing and compassion to say, you know what? To have your whole world shatter in the blink of an eye last summer, your whole world crumbled, your whole idea of self, your whole identity of you as a good person operating in this world, and then suddenly having to realize that you are doing extreme harm, that your ancestors have done extreme harm, that you've been traumatized, that you have things that are internalized. That brings up so much pain and so much grief and so much sadness and so much angst. And that upheaval is so necessary when it comes to healing. You cannot heal the things that you're not willing to confront, and that confrontation brings upheaval. So for me, the upheaval is a beautiful sign. I'm like, okay, yeah, we're in it now, y'all. That upheaval, I'm like, okay, cool. That means that people are getting shaken up a little bit. Things are starting to shift. But my way of approaching it really is from a place of compassion, because even if you take it from a personal perspective, and I've been in this place in my own personal healing journey, when I've had to look at myself in the mirror and say, wow, Noelle, that way you behaved, that thing that you said, that behavior that you had, that's not cute. You don't want to be that person. And it's uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable to learn those things about yourself. And then to say, okay, I don't like this thing about myself. I want to change it. I want to shift it. But the only way that I've been able to do those things in my healing journey is to have support from people who let me know, like, you know what, you made a mistake. You're a human being. You need to take accountability, but you're not an evil person. You're not a horrible person. That gentleness and that compassion was something as egregious as white supremacy and the things that come from white supremacy. I think it requires a gentleness for people to really come to it. No one wants to be yelled at and screamed at and, shamed and judged for these things, especially if they are trying to meet you somewhere. So again, I'm not talking about the people that are like on another level. Those are not my people. Like, those people, I'm kind of like, yeah, you still
got a little self-work.
Yeah, you still have self-work. But people that are trying to come into it, I meet them with compassion. It's firm, but it's kind. It's firm, but it's kind, and it's compassion, and it's radically graceful. And it takes a lot of work on my end to not take things personally, to be able to work with folks like that.
An example of perhaps somebody who I don't have evidence one way or the other, but somebody who perhaps deserves a bit of a similar compassion. Recently in the news, a football coach resigned from his position because during an investigation of other allegations within the company, his emails came to the forefront as being misogynistic, racist, and sexist, and not sexist, anti-gay, and his response was, I'm going to resign, so that I don't. This isn't the conversation about the team. This is about me and my past actions. I think, that shows a willingness to perhaps, to work on something like that. And where this ties back into Philadelphia is, we've recently had a lot of demonstration and call out of the Walnut Street Theater, as specifically the head of Walnut Street Theater, Bernard, and his inability to do the same thing, his inability to recognize his past actions as harmful or in any way negative. Um, and I'm actually gonna pull the camera just on me just for a second. Um, I'm a member of this theater community, and I'm reaching out directly to Bernard or anybody who has links to Bernard and wants to put a message of hope in front of him. You sure have done a lot of work here in Philadelphia, and you've brought a lot of work to the theater artists of Philadelphia, but you gotta pull yourself back from protecting yourself. You gotta open up and make yourself as vulnerable as you ask your actors to make themselves every week, and just realize what other people are saying isn't being said to hurt you. It's being said to acknowledge what hurt they're feeling. And so, this doesn't have to continue to be a crazy back and forth. And we need theater leaders to recognize these kinds of disagreements for what they are, which is us being asked to do something that will make our collaborators more effective. Anyway, that was my direct message. You know, I just want to say that, it's a lot of us, like 11th hour. Michael, you've been in the leadership at 11th hour for what, 15
17
years?
years, something like that.
17 years? Yeah.
Long time.
Um,
There's gray in my beard for it.
yeah, and I and other artists who've worked with 11th Hour have seen, the efforts by 11th Hour to be inclusive, to be, you know, uh, to treat its artists with respect, respect to the time that we spend, respect to the costs of working. There's this whole mentality that is really breaking down right now in theater and in the arts of, you do it for the love of the art. Well, yeah, we do it for the love of the art, but we still got to live. Um,
Hmm.
and so, it's being really tough for some people to break with this habit of asking for everything for free. I'm on the board of the Philadelphia Dramatist Center, and this is a conversation we have repeatedly in our board meetings.
Hmm.
Um, but, if you are actually committed to those diversity statements that you all put out, every company put out a diversity statement over the last year. If you're actually committed to it, you can't expect people to do things for free, because that's actually asking people to pay you to do whatever it is that they want to do, that they love. So yeah. I'm going to do a rough transition because I wanted to talk a little bit about why, along the lines of what Noelle brought up, hurt people hurt people. I wanted to talk a little bit about a thing that happened in the 90s, that really kind of set up the violence that's happening in Philadelphia today. Um, so we admittedly have a gun problem. We admittedly have a violence problem here in Philadelphia. Even when there aren't guns involved, you have people literally at a tourist hotspot, pummeling to death, dead, as in muerte, a person over a disagreement about a soccer game. Um, that's a violence problem. All those people were locals, and that is a huge violence problem. You have government trying to address it, and what I believe is a government deeply out of its depth, um, trying to address it, because they don't realize how decisions that they make on a daily basis, uh, trying to service the bottom line of the city's budget, affect both the current and the future of what Philadelphia is. So in the 90s, Philadelphia sold off uh, 33,000 properties to an investment group for $72 million, and issued an additional amount of bonds based secured by the those liens. Um, and then the idea was that that investment company would make back its money by aggressively pursuing the tax debt on those 33,000 properties. Um, Philadelphia defaulted on about 42 million of those bonds, and that caused those properties to go into the hands of the investment group. Well, investment groups don't actually like owning property. They'll tell you over and over again. And what this overall caused is a huge disinvestment of capital and value and available resources to the communities that were sold off, which are primarily Black and brown communities. The city of Philadelphia has for many decades been a primarily Black and brown city. And the areas where tax lien problems have existed have often been in Black and brown communities, which receive disinvestment in the form of money being taken out of the community, in the form of the carceral system, in the form of aggressive policing, aggressive taxation, aggressive uh, many things that the government system tends to more heavily enforce against Black and brown communities. Um, so I just wanted to bring that up because it's now 2021. This happened in 1997. And we're seeing the effects of it now, I believe, anyway. You can tell me if you think I'm wrong. Um, what effects have any of you seen from this disinvestment, from these properties not being available or being sold out from the Black and brown communities that had them in their possession without any ability to get them back?
Are you speaking on gentrification and some of those properties being turned into housing? And we're seeing that traditionally Black and brown communities here in Philadelphia are becoming renamed, for lack of a better term. They're getting new names and that kind of thing. Is that what you're speaking on, James? Just for clarification.
I think that's a huge part of it, yes. And I want to, in the form of gentrification, I also wanted to highlight the loss of about 80% of an organization here in an arts organization here in Philadelphia, of their archives, which is Spiral Q Productions. They were forced to leave their property because their property is now in their old property was in Powelton Village, and that's now a hot commodity. you know, I just, you know, I don't know that that folks are aware of how these all interplay. Dr. Hall, you know, you obviously have realized the problem. What would you say? You know, how have you seen any of these interactions?
I've seen, you know, my theater company is located in North Philadelphia at the Church of the Advocate. And so I can see the changes that are happening within that community. It's always been, it's almost like a border, literally a street border that separates, first of all, the temple students from the community. And then now we're seeing gentrification move into that area as well. So it's almost going to be like this triad of blendings of people coming and going. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in that space. You know, I think sometimes, and I may be, and y'all could scream at me about this later or whatever. I think sometimes gentrification to a certain extent isn't bad. It depends, however, on how it is done. It is one thing, once again, to move into somebody else's house and tell them how to decorate it. It's another thing to move into a vicinity of someone's home and try to help to improve it. And at the same time, in recognizing what is already there and not trying to bring and put your stamp on top of it. And I think that's what happens a lot of time in gentrification. People don't recognize the people that are already in the space. And so I think it has a way it could benefit the community, and most of the time it's done in a harmful way because we still approach it from that Columbus mindset. You know what I'm saying? And so I think if we start looking at some of the institutions and some of the things we do as a society and bring in some more of the radical healing, some more of the radical understanding, some more of, okay, I understand I'm walking into this with this mindset of Columbus, but I am going to overpower that. I'm a bend over backwards to recognize. I'm going to bend over, but at the same time contribute to the community and add to the community rather than take away and try to admonish and do away with that community. I don't know. I hope that clarifies some things. And I hope that for me, that's one of the things I always hope for when it comes to when I see things coming into the community, because poor communities deserve coffee shops just as much as white communities do. You know what I'm saying? We deserve to be able to walk down the street and and not be afraid of shit, just like every other community. But why do you have to wipe us out in order to get that? Yeah. How can you help bring that to us? And I know in their minds they think they're helping, right. But it's like, how do you give that to us without making property so high that we can no longer afford to live in our traditional communities? Mm-hmm. How can you do that and still, be a part of the community rather than reshaping the community and renaming it to something that's more something you like to hear? That kind of shit, and I'm interested in people and companies that are doing that kind of work. You know what I'm saying? Who are trying to find the way of mitigating that chasm between the rich and the poor and like bringing them closer together. But I'll stop right there.
And instead of displacing the poor, making a space for poorer folks to live.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have to go to class, but it's been a pleasure, everyone. Have a great day.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Hall. And yeah, I wanted to recognize the time and thank everybody for joining us. It is 11:01. And so I'm just gonna transition there to 3 up. There you go. And thank Michael for joining us because he had to drop off as well. I want to thank you, Imani and Noelle. Imani, do you have any final words? Any thoughts? Anything that this conversation feeds back into? Any of this conversation that feeds back into soon? Feel free to drop a bomb on us.
Yeah, I love everything Dr. Hall was saying about basically what's going on around Temple. I recently graduated from there and saw it firsthand, and I was one of those people that was able to be on campus and feel like, wow, I'm surrounded by my people, because I'm from Orlando, Florida, and it's a different world there, you know. But it's definitely hard to see, and like upsetting to see a community being displaced. As me being one of the displacers, I had to move on campus because that's where I needed to live, and I don't have family around here. So I think if people step back and take the time to see the white privilege that they're bringing to communities such as around Temple in North Philadelphia, and recognize that they can, even though them moving there and applying things can harm, it can also help if they take the time to unlearn some things that they need to unlearn. And I think trying to tie it back into soon is a little hard.
Oh, yeah.
That was just a really good point that she was bringing up, and that I think like if everyone took the time to step out of themselves and think of others and step into other shoes, it would be a better way to live, you know, and everyone can find happiness and find their corner of the world, which back to soon. Charlie definitely finds her corner of the world and her people. So I think just to, if you've been missing theater and you need to see something that will uplift your spirits and get you thinking in the right direction, come see soon. And yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us this morning. I really appreciate you coming out, and I hope you have a great run with Soon, and yeah, definitely folks on watching the broadcast, check out the links that Meg has put up. Buy your tickets, go see Soon today. Any last thoughts, Noelle? I'll let you have any last thoughts, and then I'm gonna cover two little things before we go. But yeah, any last thoughts, Noelle?
Really rich conversation. I'm really grateful to be involved. Yeah. Check
Thank
out
you.
Artist Heal, artistheal.org if you're interested in the work that I'm doing. I'll definitely be checking out soon. But yeah, thank you for the space.
Yeah, no worries. And thank you for joining us again. Check out there's links to artistheal.org on the Facebook links, and feel free to check those out. I am going to transition to just my camera, but thank you both for joining us this morning. And feel free to stick around on the Zoom if you want. You can comment, and if you gotta go, you gotta go. But I'll transition to my camera for now. And thank you to all my viewers. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you guys watching every week and joining us. We're available on YouTube, Mob Crush, Twitch, Twitter, and soon we'll try and figure out how to stream to Instagram. It's being a little bit more of a challenge than I thought it would be, but we'll get there. And we're also putting our content out on a couple of local news affiliates. So watch for us there. Last couple of things I wanted to cover just before we wrap up this morning. There was a recent raid of Aaron Woolkind. Aaron Whalen Woolkind. He's the vice president of the Philadelphia Proud Boys. The FBI raided his home, and I believe also his office, to attain evidence related to the January 6th insurrection investigation. I'm not in support of the carceral system, but I am in support of Nazis facing consequences for their actions. And so, yeah, good luck with that. Hope that, this seizure of computers and cell phones helps the FBI track down some of the domestic violence and domestic terrorists that we have living and working within the community in and around Philadelphia and in and around the entire country. It's very unfortunate that folks feel the need um, to express their fears and trepidations around the change of the social structure in this way. I think our guests today and every day have a really good handle on how to experience social change without becoming a danger to the society in which you live. Protecting some mythical past, protecting what you see as your community by being violent, by wishing death on others. It's not the way to go. And I would say that it's probably important that that you open your mind to the harms that you've done to others, and examine yourself, whether you feel like you're a good person or a bad person after that. Everybody's a hero of their own story. So you're obviously going to not want to feel like a bad person. But you have to realize that just because you may have harmed somebody doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you somebody who did something that harmed somebody else. And what you do with that information is how you determine whether you're a good or a bad person. A little thing here that's been on social media recently. You may have seen some folks responding to posts with the phrase "Let's go, Brandon." For those that don't watch NASCAR, I do. I love NASCAR. I don't actually watch it every week, but I do follow NASCAR. For those that don't follow NASCAR, there was a recent race, and in the winner's circle, the winning driver was being interviewed. His name is Brandon, and the crowd behind Brandon was chanting an offensive phrase about Joe Biden, our current president. And he is the president, and make no doubts about it. But he's controversial. His decisions are controversial for folks between everything from liberals to conservatives, everything from progressives to fascists. There was a chant, and folks are using "Let's go, Brandon" to reference that chant without being called out for for hate speech and speech against the president. So if you see "Let's go, Brandon," you can be pretty sure what the folks that are posting that actually mean. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Be aware of it, and be aware of what your social media friends and acquaintances are talking about. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you for sticking around for an extra 12 minutes if you did. Really appreciate your time. If you like what you've seen, please take a look at our Patreon, patreon.com/LightThiefProductions. Please also take a quick sec to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/LightThiefProductions. hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you want to know when we're going live. And we go live every Wednesday with more news and current topics, more guests from the world of the arts in and around Philadelphia. And we have these conversations every week. So tune in, join us. Feel free to post comments, like and subscribe our Facebook, our YouTube, our Twitter, our Twitch, our Mob Crush accounts, and we will see you again next week. So enjoy your week and have a good day.